Hi, my name is Rebecca Whalen, and I'm from Trident Proposal Management. What we're going to be covering today in support of the Polaris GWAC IDIQ that's coming out are 8 steps that you can take to submit a winning bid on Polaris. Let's get started. So before we jump into what the specific 8 steps are, I want to give you a quick orientation to the type of bid that Polaris is. So this is not going to be your usual proposal where you submit a narrative response. So you're not going to have to provide a technical approach. You're not providing a staffing plan or a written management plan. Instead, what you're going to do is there's going to be 6 volumes, and it's largely based on substantiating documentation within each of these sections. Something that I want to make sure you understand is that 2 of the volumes, the relevant experience volume and the past performance volume, are going to account for anywhere between 70 and 90% of the total points that you can earn on Polaris. So as we walk through the 8 steps that your company can be taking now to prepare, they're going to be very oriented towards getting you ready in these 2 volumes, because this is where the lion's share of the points that you can earn are going to be. So very first thing that you can do to make sure that you're in a good position to bid on Polaris is make sure that you don't have any disqualifiers. And I know that sounds really obvious, but before you spend any time or resources preparing a bid, you need to get into the draft RFP and make sure that you don't have any disqualifiers. There are some showstoppers that are just going to be, game over. You can't work around them. Thanks for playing, but you don't qualify for this contract. And then there's going to be some criteria that might be a little bit more in the gray zone that you might be able to either get documentation for or put things into place now to make yourself eligible for a bid. What we have put together for you is a basic eligibility checklist. This is available. It's free for download on our website. So you can take a look at that and look at all of the minimum criteria and all the basic eligibility criteria to make sure that your company is a company that would actually qualify for Polaris. The second thing that you can do right now is red team your viability as a prime. So what I mean by that is once you've determined that you can bid on Polaris, you need to evaluate whether or not you should bid on Polaris, because those are 2 very independent questions. So, is Polaris going to be a contract vehicle that makes sense for your company? Polaris is going to be the IDIQ. There's still going to be task orders, and that's where the actual work is going to be. So is your company in a good position to market to potential customers and to existing customers and steer them towards this IDIQ? Do you have any experience doing that? Are you a company that is really good at getting on IDIQs but then struggles to win task orders? Are you a company that doesn't even bid on a lot of task orders because you get too busy and you get really tied up with defending current work that you have? If that's the case, then you're really going to want to take a hard look at whether or not you want to spend the time and effort pursuing Polaris, because there are things like minimum contracting thresholds that you're going to need to meet in a sustained way to make sure you can stay on this contract. So you really have to be looking, in a long-term strategy. This is going to be a base year of about, the base contract is going to be about 5 years long with up to 5 years of option period. So looking at this 10-year horizon and saying, okay, is this an investment we want to make? And are there things that we need to do now strategically in a business development sense to make sure that we can not only be on the IDIQ, but stay on the contract and be competitive when it comes to the task orders? So, the way we think about this is that the initial bid is kind of the easy part. Once you qualify and once you get on the contract, like, okay, we're done, except that's when the work really starts to make sure that this becomes a profitable contract for your company. The next thing you want to do is draft your contract lineup. So remember, at the very beginning of this video, we talked about how relevant experience and past performance are going to account for upwards of 70% of the total points that you can get on this scorecard RFP. That's why this step is so important. I want you to make a list of any contracts that immediately come to mind as aligning to this contract and being relevant in terms of the NICS codes and the performance areas that are set forth in the the draft RFP. And so whether that's 1 contract or 15 contracts, just make your list. Don't do anything else with it yet. Just think of all the projects that you might possibly want to consider. This is going to save you time down the road so that you're not spending time chasing down the details and wondering, did we take a look at that project? Did we not take a look at that project? If you put them all on the list now, you know that you started from a consolidated source. The next thing that you're going to do is down select those projects. And what I mean by that, if you haven't done this before, you're going to look over your list and you're going to immediately cross off any project that does not meet the minimum eligibility criteria. If you had infinite time and resources, you could assess every single project that you had ever performed on, but that is not the reality for most companies. So right off the bat, I want you to cross anything off the list that doesn't have a shot at being a relevant experience or a qualifying project. So if you need help with this, again, we have a project evaluation form that's on our website. It's free to download, and it'll run you through what all of the basic criteria are in order to have a qualifying project. Because there are standards for recency, for relevance in terms of the work that was performed, the magnitude, so the value of the contract matters, the duration of the contract matters. There's all these little details that are going to help you determine whether or not you could even submit a project during this stage. So the next thing you're going to do is once you've crossed off all the projects that you know don't qualify, you're going to take a look at your remaining projects and start to rack and stack them. And what I mean by this is you're going to try to identify the projects that have the strongest chance of winning you the most points. Because again, 70%, at least 70% of the points for Polaris, we expect to come from the 2 volumes of relevant experience and past performance. So once you have this list of your eligible projects, you're going to rank them in the order from strongest to weakest. And even though we don't have a finalized self-score sheet yet from the government, we do know what areas they're going to be looking at. So taking a look at your project and figuring out, okay, which ones had a high dollar value, which ones were complex in the technical execution, which one involved multiple teammates, did any of them involve multiple customers? These are all things that are going to score you additional points. And so you're going to want to take a look at all of those factors of the projects just to see how your projects stack out. The next thing you're going to do is once you have a list that's been ranked from strongest to weakest in terms of possible points against the qualifying areas, what I want you to do now is take a look at the areas that aren't covered. So maybe you only have projects that all fall within a certain NICS code, and there's other performance areas that are not touched by your projects. If that's the case, then knowing where your gaps are can help you make better strategic decisions about who you're going to team with or whether you're going to bid at all. There's not going to be a minimum number of points that you have to score in order to bid on Polaris, but you should know that what the government is going to do when they're doing their evaluations is instead of looking across the spectrum and taking anybody with a minimum qualifying score, they're not going to do that. They're going to look and say who's the top 100 scorers, and they're going to take those. So it's almost like getting graded on the curve, but you want to score as many points as possible so that you're at the top, you're actually competitive. Because like I said, it's not going to be, well, as long as you can accumulate 50% of the points, you're going to be onboarded. It's much more competitive than that, and it's going to be a very narrow pool of contract awardees. So every point is going to count, and getting the best coverage you can is going to be the best strategy that you have to be among those top bidders. The next thing you want to do is strengthen that bidding position, right? So we just talked about knowing where your gaps are and then thinking through, okay, what capacity do I need to score more points? So is there a trusted teammate that you have that has qualifying experience that might be complementary to your own? You're not going to get extra points if everybody in your team has performance in the same NICS code or against the same performance area. You will max out certain points. And also it's important to remember that whatever projects you consider submitting, they can only be submitted once in a proposal. So you can't submit one past performance project against multiple NICS codes. You have to pick the one area where you think it's going to score the best and be the most relevant, and then find other projects to fill in the gaps. So forming a strategic partnership may increase your appeal as an offer in the eyes of the government. Because the more quality services you can provide and the more coverage areas you can cover, i.e. the more points you can score, the better you're going to do on this bid. If you need help finding a team, this is something else that we're providing as a team finder service. So whether you're looking to sub to somebody or whether you're a prime looking for subs, this is an area where we can help you. So please reach out if this applies to you. One note on this, anybody that you bring onto your team, it's really important that you think through this because they need to have a level of attention to detail the same as you do as the prime. So everybody needs to make sure that their contract admin is in order, that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. Because anybody that's on the team is going to have to meet the same minimum criteria And there's some really fine print in the RFP about what that entails. So again, I'll refer you back to our basic eligibility checklist. And anybody that you're teaming with ought to take a look at that as well and make sure that they don't have any disqualifiers. So the last step of things that you can start doing now is actually starting to prepare your proposal. What I mean by that is start pulling all your contract documentation and your substantiating documents that you're going to submit as part of the proposal. Remember, I mentioned that this is a scorecard RFP and it's not a written response. So what you're going to be doing is submitting documentation that exists that proves that you do the type of services and the type of work that you're claiming that you do. And this is often found in documents that you don't author. And what I mean by that is it might be the award performance work statement or statement of work from the contract. That's something that the government provides you, right? So you've got to make sure that you've got that somewhere in your records and that it says what you think it says. Looking up your FPDS record to make sure that the contract value that's reflected there and the contract type and the primary place of performance, making sure all those details are correct now is going to save you pain later. Because if you do have to make any corrections, because errors happen, right? There's a certain amount of time that takes, and you want to get a head start on making sure that all your documentation is up to date. So there's no question about what does and does not count in terms of qualifying experience. Looking even at the details of contact information. On the government side, contracting officers change, and there's going to be a requirement that for some companies that they certify that what you're claiming you do is what you've actually done for them. And so do you know who to contact on your contract to sign off on that? There's some really specific instructions, again, in the RFP about who can sign off on that and whose signature will be accepted on behalf of the government. So this is the time now, before we even have our final RFP, to start hunting down any of your missing paperwork and making sure that you know exactly what all of the data says. So we ran through that at a really high level and really quick. We do have a blog that goes into a little bit more detail, so check that out on our website. But really what I want you to take away from this is that even really organized companies can be surprised by the amount of time and effort it takes to prepare a response to a scorecard bid. And a lot of the facts, are already written in history, so you can't change them. So taking the time up front to prepare now is just going to mean less headaches down the road as we move into the actual proposal response phase of this RFP. If you need help determining your eligibility, looking at your projects, or finding a team, please give Trident a call. We'd be happy to help you with those services. Good luck.